Hey everyone. So you know how we've been talking about like the inner workings of schools? Well, get ready for a serious deep dive because you've sent over some seriously in-depth stuff, research papers, reports, all about how schools work. Not just classrooms and lessons, but like the whole shebang as these big, complex systems.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
It really is. So are you ready to kind of unpack all of that, explore the dynamics that make schools tick?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Awesome, because I have a feeling we're going to uncover some serious aha moments along the way.
I think so too. We often talk about schools on a very individual level, the student, the teacher, the principal.
Right, right.
But these sources, they really encourage us to kind of zoom out and see the bigger picture.
Okay, I like
To
that.
look at schools as these intricate networks of interactions, rules, shared beliefs,
Hmm.
you know, basically as living, breathing social systems.
Social systems. Okay, now you're using the big words. I gotta be honest, that makes me think of those diagrams with like a million arrows and
Yeah.
boxes. What does that actually mean, though, in a school context?
It's actually simpler than it sounds. Think of any group of people who come together for a shared purpose. That's a social system.
Okay.
There's interdependence, where what one person does affects others. You've got your established ways of doing things, goals everyone's working towards, even if they're unspoken. It's all connected.
And schools definitely have all of that, big time. From those unwritten rules about like when you can use your phone
Oh, yeah.
to how teachers are collaborating or sometimes not collaborating, let's be real.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
There's this one quote that really stuck with me. It's from Waller. He described a school as this organized whole comprising of interesting personalities bound together in an organic relationship.
Oh, that's
It
it.
just clicked for me.
Yeah, no, it's a great way to put it. And that organic relationship is always changing and adapting. So to really understand it, this one source breaks down a school's social system into these key parts, like a little map.
Yeah.
And we start with the structure, the hierarchy, who's in charge, who makes the decisions. You've got your principals, department heads, all the way up to the superintendent.
Think a boss.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then you have the individual piece, which I find so fascinating because it's all about how each person, from the student body president to, I don't know, the cafeteria worker,
Absolutely.
they all bring their own backgrounds, their own beliefs, their own experiences to the table. It's this whole mix of personalities all thrown together.
It is. And that mix within the structure we talked about
Yeah.
creates a school's culture. Those unspoken norms, like whether it's more competitive or collaborative, or if the focus is more on academics or extracurriculars.
Right, right. And there's that elephant in the room, the thing that I feel like everyone kind of dances around, school politics. Because let's be honest, every school has its power dynamics.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Those relationships, those alliances that really impact how things get done or don't get done.
It's the unspoken truth, right?
Yeah, it's like this hidden curriculum that everyone's learning at the same time.
Exactly. And it's something we have to acknowledge, even if it's not always talked about openly. But at the end of the day, the heart of a school's social system, the core, should be the teaching and learning. That's what it all comes back to.
Exactly, that's the whole point, right?
That's the mission.
And I think for everyone listening, this deep dive is all about understanding how these dynamics, these forces, ultimately impact and shape the learning environment for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about creating better schools.
Exactly.
Right, Summer.
And we can't forget about the environment outside the school walls, right?
Oh, of course not.
The community, the funding, all those external
Which
factors.
should play a huge role.
Definitely a huge role. And then, of course, you have the outputs, the results, student achievement, teacher satisfaction, all those things that kind of paint a picture of how well the system's working or not.
It's like a report card for the whole system.
Right, exactly.
It truly is a complex ecosystem. And to understand it fully, we need to explore how these formal structures, like bureaucracy, operate within this very human setting.
Bureaucracy, everyone's favorite word, right?
Right.
But seriously, how does all that structure actually play out in a school? Sometimes it can feel like navigating a maze, you know?
It really can. Well, there's this sociologist, Max Weber, and he actually defined bureaucracy in a way that applies so perfectly to schools. Think about it, a clear chain of command, specialized roles for everyone, a whole system of rules and procedures. Sound familiar?
Oh, 100%. It's like in every school, there's that one teacher who knows every single detail of the fire drill.
Oh, yeah.
Down to like how many seconds it should take to evacuate.
Exactly. They've got the binder, the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
They're ready.
They're ready.
But while bureaucracy often gets a bad rap, for being slow, rigid.
Because sometimes it is.
Sometimes it definitely is, you're not wrong. But this research also highlights some important benefits. Bureaucracy can actually promote fairness, consistency, even efficiency in a school. Clear rules can level the playing field for students, make sure resources are divided fairly, all that good stuff.
So in a perfect world, a well-run bureaucracy means that no one's getting lost in the shuffle.
Ideally, yes, that's the hope.
Mm.
But this research acknowledges the downsides too. Like the potential for boredom from doing the same tasks over and over.
Right.
Low morale when teachers feel like just cogs in a machine, not valued for their individuality. And then those communication breakdowns between departments that just seem to happen no matter what.
I've definitely experienced that. Remember that time when, and that's where things get really interesting because it's not just about these rules on paper, it's about people.
Right, it's about how those people actually operate within the system.
Exactly. So how do we even begin to make sense of that, like the human side of things?
Well, this is where we go beyond just those structures and look at something called role theory. And these sources use a really helpful case study, the school principal.
Oh, the principal. They always seem to be at the center of everything, dealing with teachers, students, parents, the district office.
Right, they're pulled in so many directions.
It's a lot.
And the research talks about how many different hats a principal has to wear. You know, they're the instructional leader, they're the disciplinarian, the budget manager, sometimes even the counselor.
Oh my gosh, it's true. I've seen that.
It's a lot of pressure, and often those roles come with, like, conflicting expectations.
Totally. Like they're supposed to be both supportive and firm, a visionary leader, but also like grounded in the day-to-day realities of the school.
Exactly.
That sounds like a tough balancing act.
It is. And to make things even more complex, the research points out that a principal's own self-perception, how they see themselves in their role, might be totally different from how teachers, students, or even the community see them. There's this potential for a huge disconnect.
Wow, and no wonder communication is so important in a school, because if the person steering the ship isn't even sure where everyone thinks they're going...
Right. That's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. It's like, good luck, everybody.
And speaking of communication, one of the sources, it actually uses these terms, interceptive distance and communicative distance, to talk about this potential gap between how a principal sees themselves and how others see them.
Okay, so unpack those terms for me.
Basically, it highlights how important it is for a principal to, first of all, be aware of those different perspectives, how teachers, students, parents are all viewing their actions, and then to actually communicate clearly and consistently with everybody.
Right, because otherwise everyone's just left guessing and making assumptions, which never ends well.
Exactly. It creates this breeding ground for misunderstandings and conflict.
Totally.
And it's not just about communication styles. We also have to consider the deeply held beliefs that shape a school's culture and how decisions are made. The research calls this value theory.
Okay, so we're not just talking about the mission statement hanging on the wall in the hallway.
No, this is about the fundamental values that actually drive everything else, like the DNA of a school.
Interesting.
The research breaks it down into 3 levels, and it's fascinating. So first, you've got your sacred values.
Sacred values.
These are often tied to, like, broader societal beliefs about knowledge, success, even the purpose of education itself, you know.
So these are the big picture ideas about what really matters when it comes to kids learning and growing up.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what does it even mean to be educated? What do we want our kids to be learning in school?
Big questions.
And those often translate into what the research calls secular values.
Secular values, okay.
These were reflected in things like laws, policies, how a community chooses to fund its schools. For example, is there a big push for standardized testing? Or is there a focus on, say, vocational training and practical skills?
Right, right.
These choices, they reveal a lot about what a community truly values.
It's like looking beneath the surface to see what's actually driving those decisions.
Exactly. And then you've got your operational values.
Okay, so we've got sacred, secular,
And operational.
operational values. Got it.
These are the ones that play out in the day-to-day life of the school, like how teachers run their classrooms, how discipline is handled, whether there's an emphasis on, say, celebrating effort alongside achievement.
So many layers.
I know, right?
It makes you realize that even a simple decision at a school can be influenced by this whole web of, like, values and beliefs.
Absolutely. And this is where things can get, you know, really tricky. Because what happens when a teacher's deeply held values clash with the school's policies or with what parents of the community expect?
Oh, yeah, that's bound to create some tension.
It does. And it's in those moments of tension that What we call decision-making theory becomes really important.
Okay, so tell me more about that decision-making theory.
Well, the research we have here, it outlines different models that schools use to make decisions. And each model comes with its own strengths and weaknesses.
That makes sense. Like, depending on the situation, you kind of need different tools to figure out, like, what the best course of action is, right?
Exactly. So one model is called the classical model.
Okay.
And it basically assumes that you have all the information you need and you can logically weigh every option to make the most rational choice.
Right.
It sounds good in theory, but in reality.
It's usually way more complicated than that.
Right. Like way more messy.
Life is messy.
That's why there's also the administrative model, which acknowledges that we often have to make decisions with incomplete information.
Oh, 100%.
It relies more on intuition, experience, being able to adapt quickly.
Okay, so that one feels a little bit more true to life, Like, remember that time we had to choose what classes to take for next semester? We definitely did not have all the information.
Right.
We just kind of had to go with our gut.
Exactly. We've all been there. Now, another model is called the incremental model.
Okay.
And this is where change happens more gradually through a series of small adjustments.
So instead of making, like, one big dramatic decision, it's more like slowly steering the ship in a new direction.
You got it. Exactly.
Interesting.
And then there's the mixed scanning model, which is kind of a blend of all the others. It recognizes that sometimes you do need to make a quick decision, based on the most crucial factors. But other times, a more thorough, deliberate approach is necessary.
So it's about knowing when to kind of zoom in on the details and when to zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
Exactly. And being able to kind of shift back and forth between those two.
Right, right.
And the key takeaway here is that by understanding these different decision-making models, you can start to, decode why schools make the choices they do.
Oh, I like that.
It's about understanding those underlying factors.
And maybe even giving them a little grace, because sometimes it's just complicated.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
really is.
There's no easy answers.
No easy answers when it comes to schools, that's for sure. Wow. I'm feeling like we just went through, a whole semester's worth of school sociology.
Right. It's a lot to take in.
It is, but it's so fascinating, too. Although I have to admit, sometimes these theories and models, they can feel a little bit, abstract. So for someone listening out there who's not a sociologist, like myself,
Right.
what's the key takeaway here? How does understanding all of this actually help us navigate the real world of schools?
That's such a good question. I think the biggest takeaway is that schools aren't these fixed, unchanging institutions.
Yeah.
They're dynamic, complex systems. They're constantly evolving, responding to all sorts of pressures, internal, external, you name it.
So it's not enough to just look at what's happening on the surface?
Exactly. To really understand why schools make the decisions they do, why certain things work or don't work, we have to look at that bigger picture, at all those interconnected parts we've been talking about, all those different layers.
Like that saying, every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And the good news is that once you kind of understand how the system works, you can start to identify those leverage points where change is actually possible.
Oh, I like that.
Right.
So knowing all of this can actually be empowering.
Absolutely. It's about agency.
Yeah.
Whether you're a student who's feeling lost in the shuffle, a parent trying to advocate for your child, a teacher feeling burned out and wondering how to make a real difference. This understanding of schools as social systems can be incredibly valuable.
It's like we've been handed a map and a compass to navigate this whole complex landscape.
Precisely. And the more we understand how these systems operate, the better equipped we are to advocate for positive change, to create learning environments that truly support everyone, students, teachers, administrators, the whole community.
So what you're saying is this isn't just about understanding the what of schools, but also the why.
Yes.
And maybe even the how to make things better.
Exactly. It's about using this knowledge to ask those critical questions, to challenge assumptions, and to work towards creating schools that are more equitable, more effective, and ultimately more fulfilling for everyone involved.
It's a good goal.
It is.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about, that's for sure. It's amazing how much we kind of take for granted about how schools work, without really understanding all those forces at play behind the scenes.
It's true. But the more we learn, the more we realize how much potential there is for positive change.
So for everyone listening, as you're going about your day-to-day interactions with schools, whether you're a student, a teacher, a parent, keep this conversation in mind. Think about the structures, the values, the individual stories that are shaping your school community. because you have more power than you think to make a difference.
That's right. And if this conversation sparked any aha moments for you, any questions, anything you want to share about your own experiences, we would love to hear from you.
That's right. Head over to our website, send us an email. We're always up for more exploration and conversation here at the Deep Dive.
Absolutely, because learning is a lifelong journey.
It really is. Well said. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of schools as social systems.
Thanks, everyone.
And until next time, keep those minds curious.